Imagine waking up one morning to discover that everything which once defined your place in the world is about to disappear. Your status, your purpose, the symbols you were taught to honor since childhood, all suddenly rendered obsolete by forces you do not fully understand and cannot stop. This is not a metaphor. This was the reality faced by the samurai of Japan in the mid-19th century, during one of the most violent transitions in identity that any warrior class has ever endured. The Bakumatsu period was not an age of glorious battles and heroic charges. It was the soundless collapse of an entire way of life. The age of samurai glory was not a single moment, but a long era forged in blood, loyalty, and relentless uncertainty. From the late Heian period through the Kamakura and into the heart of the Sengoku era, the samurai were not legends. They were the living structure of Japanese society. Their world was violent, unstable, and unforgiving, and precisely because of that, their values hardened into something absolute. Every day carried the weight of death, and every decision was measured against honor. In this period, a samurai's life was defined from birth. Childhood was brief. From a young age, boys were trained to endure pain, suppress fear, and obey without hesitation. Martial skills were essential, but mental discipline mattered just as much. A samurai was expected to remain calm in chaos, composed in defeat, and respectful even toward death itself. Emotion was not weakness. Losing control of it was. This mindset was not philosophical abstraction. It was survival. Warfare during the Sengoku period shaped the samurai into their most feared and respected form. Japan was fragmented into competing domains, ruled by daimyo, who relied entirely on their warriors for power. Alliances shifted constantly. Betrayal was common. Castles rose across the landscape, and entire generations knew nothing but conflict. In this environment, reputation was currency. A samurai's name could protect his family or doom them. Honor was not symbolic. It determined who lived, who commanded, and who was remembered. Despite the brutality, this era also produced refinement. The samurai were not merely killers. They were expected to cultivate the arts, study poetry, practice calligraphy, and understand philosophy. This balance between violence and beauty became a defining contradiction of the class. To master the sword without mastering the self was considered incomplete. Zen Buddhism reinforced this duality, teaching acceptance of impermanence and detachment from fear. Death was not an enemy. It was a certainty to be faced without trembling. Loyalty stood above all else. A samurai's bond to his lord was sacred, surpassing personal desire, family ties, and even life itself. To betray that bond was to erase one's existence. This is why acts of ritual suicide, seppuku, were not seen as tragedy, but as restoration. Death, when chosen with honor, preserved dignity in a world where failure was inevitable. This belief did not emerge from romanticism, but from a society where survival depended on trust and absolute commitment. During this golden age, the sword became more than a weapon. It was an extension of the samurai's identity, believed to contain the soul of its bearer. Blades were passed through generations, named, revered, and cared for with ritual precision. To draw one's sword was a declaration of intent. To sheath it without bloodshed required restraint greater than violence itself. Every gesture carried meaning. Every action echoed beyond the moment. In their prime, the samurai embodied order within chaos. They enforced law, protected villages, defended borders, and upheld a moral structure in a fractured land. While peasants feared them and lords depended on them, society itself revolved around their presence. This was the era in which the samurai were not symbols of the past or relics of nostalgia. They were the present, necessary, feared, respected. This was their true glory, not because they were undefeated, but because they were essential. The world they lived in required exactly what they were: disciplined warriors shaped by violence, guided by ritual, and bound by honor stronger than fear. And it was precisely this perfection, forged for endless war, that would later prevent them from surviving a world that no longer needed them. The transition from samurai glory to samurai decay did not arrive with fire or invasion. It arrived quietly, disguised as peace. When Tokugawa Ieyasu unified Japan in 1600 and established the Tokugawa shogunate, the endless wars that had defined the samurai for centuries came to an abrupt end. For the first time in generations, the sword had nowhere to go. Victory, paradoxically, became the beginning of decline. The Edo period was an age of stability, but stability is poison to a class built for chaos. Samurai who had spent their lineage perfecting the art of war were suddenly ordered to govern, to administer, to obey laws instead of enforcing them through battle. They still wore their swords, still walked with status, but their daily lives no longer required courage under fire. What once defined them became ceremonial. This shift created a deep internal fracture. Outwardly, the samurai retained prestige. Inwardly, they were hollowing out. Their training no longer aligned with reality. They memorized codes of honor designed for death, while living lives increasingly defined by paperwork, etiquette, and restraint. The battlefield disappeared, but the expectation to die for honor remained, an impossible contradiction. Economics accelerated this decay. Samurai stipends were fixed and hereditary, paid in rice according to ancient assessments of land productivity. Time, inflation, and urbanization eroded their value. Meanwhile, merchants, officially ranked below the samurai, thrived in the expanding cities of Edo, Osaka, and Kyoto. Wealth shifted silently, humiliating a warrior class that still claimed moral superiority but could no longer command material power. This imbalance cut deep. Samurai were forbidden from engaging in trade, yet forced to borrow from those they once looked down upon. Debt became common. Pride became fragile. The sword, once a tool of authority, turned into a reminder of what they were no longer allowed to be. Violence was restricted. Duels were regulated. The warrior spirit was contained within rules it was never meant to survive. Psychologically, the samurai entered an age of quiet despair. They were trained to endure suffering without complaint, and so they did. But endurance without purpose corrodes the soul. Many clung obsessively to ritual, appearance, and moral rigidity, attempting to preserve relevance through purity. Others fell into alcoholism, isolation, or reckless behavior, searching for meaning in a world that had outgrown them. Japan itself mirrored this condition. Under the Sengoku policy, the country closed itself off from most foreign contact, fearing that change would destabilize the delicate balance of order. For over 2 centuries, Japan chose preservation over progress. The samurai became guardians of this stasis, enforcing a system that ensured their survival while simultaneously guaranteeing their obsolescence. In this era, the samurai were no longer warriors shaping history. They were symbols frozen in time, maintaining traditions that society no longer required but was not yet ready to abandon. Their glory lingered in memory and ceremony, but their power had already faded. The tragedy of the samurai was not that they were defeated in battle. It was that they were forced to live long enough to realize the world no longer needed what they were born to be. The final collapse of the samurai did not come as a slow erosion. It came as a shock, sudden, violent, and irreversible. In 1853, when Commodore Matthew Perry's black ships appeared on the horizon, they carried more than cannons and steel. They carried the future. And in that moment, centuries of isolation shattered. Japan was forced to look outward, and the samurai were forced to confront a terrifying truth. Their world had already ended. They simply had not been told. The Meiji Restoration was not merely a political reform. It was a cultural execution. The emperor returned to power, not as a symbol of tradition, but as a vehicle for modernization. The feudal system was dismantled. Domains were abolished. A national army was created, built on conscription rather than lineage. And with a single decree, the samurai lost the right to carry their swords, the very object that defined their identity, their status, their soul. For the samurai, this was not just unemployment. It was annihilation of meaning. Their entire existence had been structured around service, sacrifice, and death in the name of honor. Suddenly, those values were declared obsolete. A farmer's son could now wear a uniform. A merchant could gain influence. Education, industry, and adaptability replaced loyalty and bloodline. The world no longer asked who your ancestors were, only what you could produce. Some samurai adapted, They became teachers, administrators, military officers in the new state. They exchanged armor for ink, swords for documents, but adaptation came at a cost. Discipline survived, but identity did not. Many lived with the quiet shame of survival, feeling that to live without purpose was worse than death itself. Others refused. The Satsuma Rebellion was the last scream of a dying class. Men charging modern rifles with swords, not out of ignorance, but conviction. They knew they would lose. That was the point. Defeat was preferable to irrelevance. When Saigo Takamori fell, it symbolized more than military failure. It marked the moment Japan chose the future over its past, no matter the blood price. For the samurai alive at that time, the fall was deeply personal. They were raised to believe that their existence upheld the moral spine of the nation. To see that nation discard them was a spiritual betrayal. Many experienced profound psychological collapse, loss of status, loss of community, loss of self. Suicide, poverty, and silence followed. History remembers the class. It forgets the individuals. And yet Japan itself inherited their dilemma. Modern Japan remains one of the most technologically advanced societies in the world, yet it retains a deep resistance to external influence. Immigration remains limited. Cultural assimilation is cautious. Change is carefully filtered. Just as in the Edo period, stability is prized, sometimes at the expense of adaptability. The same instinct that preserved the samurai system for too long now shapes modern Japan's relationship with the outside world. This comparison is not accidental. Japan learned painfully that isolation creates strength only until the world arrives uninvited. The samurai collapsed because their values could not evolve fast enough to meet reality. Modern Japan faces a quieter version of the same challenge: how to preserve identity without fossilizing it. The fall of the samurai was not a failure of courage. It was a failure of timing. They were perfect for the world they were born into, and tragically unfit for the one that followed. Their downfall reminds us that honor without adaptability becomes rigidity, and tradition without evolution becomes a prison. For the samurai, the greatest tragedy was not losing their swords. It was surviving long enough to understand that everything they had trained for, suffered for, and died for no longer had a place in the world. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe.